Hello, everybody. I think we're live. Let me go to the live chat so I can pull you guys up and you can tell me if you can hear me or not. My throat's very scratchy, so I don't sound like myself, but just let me know if you can indeed hear me before we start. I'm good. Dallas Engineer, good to see you. Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. Excellent. Okay, so first of all, hello. It feels like it's been a while. I have been, I don't know what has been going on, but I've been battling some sort of throat flu thing, and I'm finally getting past the fever, so I feel like myself again. I wanted to. A lot of people have reached out and wanted to hear more about the things that go along with prison and prison reform. Since that's near and dear to my heart, I figured that one day a week I would set aside and sort of go through the various aspects of sort of what that entails. And I think that usually Friday's probably going to be that day. Tomorrow there's the guy from Iran that's going to be here, so I'm just switching up those days. But usually this is probably going to be a Friday thing. Because there's a lot that goes into it and a lot of different moving pieces. And I wanted to start out also tonight by saying that next Monday, the guys that do the vigilante catfish to catch a predator people, they're going to be here on Monday. I didn't realize that that was going to be such a controversial topic, but there are staunchly two camps apparently that are on both sides of this. There are the people that think that they aren't doing anything wrong by setting up these predators, would-be predators, and confronting them, and then there's the group that thinks that that sort of erodes from justice and it is it can be sloppily done. And I can see both sides of it, but I'm trying to get somebody that is from the side that it shouldn't be done. So if you're interested in joining us on Monday and you don't feel like the vigilante to catch a predator is necessarily a good thing, email me and let me know, and we'll bring you on. Also, we're going to be tackling veganism next week, along with climate change. I've got an awesome lady that's coming to talk about. She deals with population impact studies, so she's going to be talking about that. And Arn will be with us, so it'll be a good week next week. Okay. Also, too, if you didn't hear the other night, well, I'll go into that before we close. Okay. Let me pull up vMix and we'll get into this. So, basically the way that I'm going to tackle this, like I said, usually this will be a Friday thing. But the way that I've got it mapped out is that we're going to go through the impact that first fines, fees, and like civil forfeiture have on people. Then we'll go into actual laws, what goes into breaking them, the rights that you have once you're arrested, and the booking process. We'll then go into the process once you're taken downtown to see a magistrate, what rights you have there, bail and bonds, pre-sentencing things. Then we'll talk about the lead up to the court dates, where you're hiring attorneys, what all goes into that. Probation and parole. If you receive an active sentence, the politics that go in with the Department of Corrections, where you're sent, how you are processed, and assigned, depending on your camp and your restriction level. Then we'll talk about the things that go into prison life, how companies are gouging prisoners with commissary, phone, other items that they have to purchase. We'll then go into the control aspect, which is the sort of the admin of prison. The once you get out, what you owe, what you'll be expected to do, that sort of thing, and then the aftermath. So it'll probably be like a 6-week thing. I plan on going really in depth into it. I was gonna do videos, like standalone videos, but I'm a live streamer, so I'm just gonna stick to what I know. But when you leave, just to give you an idea, when you leave prison, you get one of these bright red envelopes, and inside this envelope is your PO contact information, an identification card in case you don't have a license or an ID, so that you can, I don't know what places take literally computer paper, but and then you get the rules that you have to abide by once you're out, which is literally 20 pages long. And I just want to highlight a couple of these really quickly, and then we'll dive into the fines and fees. But basically what this says is, while you are in between your rights being restored and being released, you have to submit at all times to drug test searches of any kind, whether it be, if you're with someone, like let's say I'm with my mother, and she gets pulled over because I'm in the car, she's subject to have her vehicle searched, with no questions asked. It's part of the deal. Obviously, you can't be around other felons or anyone with pending charges. You have to be at home by 7 p.m. So for a year, there was no going out after 7, which was the most excruciating aspect of it. But we'll dive into that more later as well. So on the screen, I've got, let me move Trump here. Let me close Trump out. So we'll be following along over here. Let me back up. We're following on. You can follow along over here, obviously, and I'm just going to sort of go through why fines and fees are usually targeted towards people who are in like poverty, or they're not in a good situation, and how they get caught up in the wheel that is criminal justice. So to start out, there is there's a lot of states in this country, and I know of 9 for certain, where 20 to 40% of their revenue in the state comes from fines, fees, court restitution, that sort of thing. And Missouri is probably the worst in the United States. Missouri is up to 60% of their state revenue hinges on the fact that they're getting this revenue in. And a lot of times you get a ticket in this game that they do for revenue for very frivolous things. I'm not talking about the fines and fees that come with, any sort of traffic violations or drug offenses or serious crimes, theft, that sort of thing. For example, in Arizona, you can be fined for spitting on a sidewalk. Colorado, you can be fined for having furniture outside of your house. I'm going to do Florida last, obviously, because Florida is the best. Indiana, if you're caught sniffing glue for excitement, if you're going to sniff glue, what other reason other than excitement would it be? That was my biggest thing. But you can be fined up to $300 for sniffing glue for excitement in Indiana. North Dakota, you can be fined up to $800 for shooting off fireworks after 11 p.m. In Tennessee, you can be charged up to $1,000, and this was passed in 2011, for sharing your Netflix password. Excuse me. Other laws that are not so state-specific but are covered in many states are like what they call decency laws. Like if your pants are sagging, believe it or not, Missouri gets a absolutely outrageous amount for this, for having chipped paint in the exterior of your house. If it's visible, and they can say that it's an eyesore, you can be fined for having chipped paint, overgrown lawns, for washing your car on the weekends. That especially in California. Florida. Now we all know that Florida. If anybody's watching from Florida, bless your heart. But you guys are a special breed, because I am almost positive that this is not still a thing. And the language that I'm going to use here is the language that's in the actual law. So this is not me being politically incorrect or trying to offend anyone. This is just the language that is used in the law that was passed in 1989. Okay? In Florida, you can be fined up to $1,000 for throwing dwarfs. I kid you not. Dwarf throwing was banned in 1989. Now, interestingly enough, in 2011, some state legislature tried to overturn that law, saying, quote, "The government shouldn't decide how people make a living." So, thank you, Florida. Thank you, Florida. Yeah, I don't know what you say to that. Like, what? Number one, why did they have to make a law that banned? I just need to stop. Okay. So let me find my place here. Okay. All right. So basically, these fines and fees obviously can rack up, and if you're someone that is able to take care of these, you've got a good lawyer, great, no problem. The problem comes in when it's people who are in poverty and they receive these fines, and usually that's who it's targeted at, and for a very specific reason that we're going to get into here in just a minute. But these laws are usually almost always targeted at people who are impoverished. And what this does in a lot of cases, there are a few exceptions in certain states, but for the most part, if you're somebody that is in poverty and you can't afford these fines, you have to go to court to take care of these. Once you're in court, the judge is going to give you the opportunity to pay it that day. If you can't, they'll set a deadline. If you can't pay it by that time, there are a couple different things that happen at that point. You can either you'll either get more fees added on. It'll go to the DMV, which will suspend your license until those are paid off, and you also incur DMV fees. Or you will get a jail sentence. Usually, it's it's anywhere between a couple days to 60 days, depending on the infraction. And I'm basically just talking about infractions at this point. These are just these frivolous sort of things that there's no victim. It's a petty, very petty crime, but it's pushed because the state has budgets. They need to hit those budgets, and they rely heavily on these revenue streams by getting it. It's predatory. So in a lot of cases, what winds up happening is that these fines go unpaid. In the states where it hits the DMV, when they suspend your license, because you have to pay the court before, and then you have to pay a restoration fee for your license. When that happens, that creates another hell for these people, because a lot of them, I'm not going to say a lot of them, nearly everyone, and obviously there are exceptions, but nearly everyone relies on a car of some kind to get somewhere. Like, you have to go somewhere, whether it be to work, the doctor's office, to get groceries. At some point, for the most part, people use a car. In these cases, these people, whether they know their license is suspended or not, will be driving. They'll either go through a license point check, they'll get pulled over, something will happen, and then they will be in the predicament where they're driving while license suspended. Now, depending again on which state you're from, you can either get cited and let go, or they will take you to jail for that, which obviously compounds even more on the and all of this can be led from spitting on the sidewalk if you're from Arizona. Or I was watching a video earlier. There was one lady that her car, like her carport or garage, the outside of it was brick, like red brick, finished brick, like you'd see in a house. And she got a fine from the city because the city insisted that should be painted. It's brick. It's like, that's the look. They can't tell you, to paint the brick. Obviously, this is just a way to throw a ticket at someone, and you have to deal with it. You don't have a choice. And so all of this, going to jail, your license suspended, it'll really fuck your world up, like, very quickly. And all of this for stuff that may not even be your fault, like painting your garage, which is really, really stupid. There was also another story of a young gentleman. He was African American guy. I think he was in his early 20s, but this happened to him. He got hit with that. I want to say it was one of those indecency laws where he was like, his pants were sagging or something like that, and then something else. I can't remember what the other thing was, but these things, there were 3 tickets that sort of accumulated over a period of time. He didn't pay him. His license was suspended, and the judge issued a warrant for his arrest. He was sent to jail. Now, these happened in 3 different counties. So he was transported from one county to another, and he was talking to his dad. His dad had taken care of 2 counties. It was the 3rd one that he was still outstanding in. He still owed like $800 in, and they transferred him to that 3rd county, and no one knows what happened while he was in this 3rd county's detention center. He was there for less than 24 hours and hung himself in his jail cell. And, his mom and dad had to get that call. All of this because of frivolous fines and fees that are targeted at people who are below the poverty line, and unnecessarily, because the states need that money. Each state has a budget they need to hit. They've allocated, how much is going to come from which revenue source, and not all states do this, by the way, but there are a lot that rely heavily on these fines and fees. And number one, just to speak to that, this could be settled very easily, where you wouldn't have to rely on other people paying fines and fees that are stupid, that don't hurt anyone, and only hurt people that they're being imposed on. And that is to make marijuana legal nationwide and tax it, and then tax the church. If you tax the church alone, you would have enough money to cover anything that you needed expense-wise for the state. But it's easier to target people with no means, I guess. Now, I want to get into the ins and outs of mass incarceration, because I think this is going to blow your mind. Let's see. The American criminal justice system currently holds about 2.3 million people in 1,719 state prisons. There are 109 federal prisons, 1,772 juvenile correctional facilities, 3,163 local jails, and 80 Indian country jails, as well as in military prisons, immigration detention facilities, civil commitment centers, state psychiatric hospitals, and prisons in the United States territories. What we're going to look at is a slideshow that was done very well, by the way, by the Prison Policy Initiative, and they've broken these things down just beautifully. But I think everyone already knows that the United States locks up more people per capita, than any other nation. And the staggering rate of 698 per 100,000 residents. So here's what we're looking at. In local jails, what that looks like is 612,000 people not convicted of a crime yet is nearly 500,000 people, 462,000. Only 150,000 have been convicted. Of that, violent offenders make up 146,000. The rest, non-violent of that, so you're looking at, 500 and some thousand non-violent, jail-wise. Let's see. State prisons, 1.3 million. Of that, 712,000 are violent offenders, and I am all for violent offenders staying where they are. This is, when we talk about what we're talking about here, this is in no way talking about violent offenders. Property crime violators are 233, 200,000, 235,000. God, I cannot speak tonight. Getting tongue twisted. Drug offenses are nearly 200,000, and then like public disorder, crimes, nuisance, that sort of thing is a little over 150,000. On the side branch that you see, where it kind of, this little strip to the side, That's pulling out of the circle there, so that you can see in detail what those little parts are. That's juveniles up top, territorial prisoners, immigration and detention, and involuntary commitment. And then down below is Indian and military. So those make up a very, very, very small sort of percentage there. So in the jails part, what this does is just sort of break it down a little bit more in detail on who's in there for what. Drug crimes, you're looking at trafficking 43,000, possession 66,000, other drug 8,000. I'm trying to look for, okay, the interesting one is up over public order. The first one that says parole probation violations 11,000. That's usually, and if you look at the other ones in that sort of category, that's mainly what people wind up going to state prison for. Now, in this chart, they're not convicted yet, but a lot of people that are in prison for nonviolent offenses usually stem from, even though their original charge may have been something to do with drugs or, you know, breaking and entering, theft, that sort of thing, somewhere along the line they violated their probation or parole, and that's what's going to get them sent over. So that just sort of breaks that down in detail a little bit more. Despite reforms, drug offenses are still a defining characteristic of the federal system. If you look at these are federal prisoners. Hold on one second. Got the wrong. Bear with me one second. Brought the wrong one. Okay, maybe I didn't include this one. Okay, this one isn't in there. But basically what this does is just break it down on the federal level between violent offenders and nonviolent. On the federal level, violent offenders, of the 221,000 inmates there are, only 13,000 are violent. The overwhelming majority, which is nearly 90,000, are drugs. So that speaks to that. Now, this one right here is going to talk about the different agencies that make up the prison system and different arresting agencies. That's not really relevant to what we're talking about here tonight, though. So, what is pretrial detention? Now, what this is everything that we're going to be talking about tonight is an avenue stream that exploits people who are in poverty and uses them to either get them trapped in the system or to extort money out of them in ways you're not going to believe. So, pretrial detention is one method that is used. Now, over 540,000 people are locked up who haven't been convicted or sentenced yet. Now, why is that? Many of the detained in local jails because they can't afford to pay the bail amount set to secure their release. The median bail amount for felonies is $10,000, which represents 8 months' income for a typical person detained because they can't pay bail. Now, pretrial detention is a way that the court, when you get arrested and you get taken down to the magistrate, and the magistrate is going to set your bond depending on what your record's like and what the crime is. And you have 3 options, I believe, at your, I know in North Carolina you have 3 options at your disposal at that point. Actually 4. The first one is you can get an I believe it's called an ROI. Basically, you return on your own accord. You agree or you swear to show up to court. They'll let you sign yourself out. It doesn't cost anything. Usually that's reserved for your first offense, and like if you don't have a criminal record. The second method is to pay the bond outright, if you can do that. Third is you can put up assets. So if you have land, property, that sort of thing, you can put up assets against your bond. The next thing is bail bondsman, or the bounty hunters. You can call them to get you out. Usually what they do is they charge 10% of whatever your bond is. So if your bond is $10,000, then you pay them $1,000. They'll get you out, and basically you become their responsibility until that first court date. And they don't play. I have the first time I was, for anybody that's watching that don't know, I was arrested for cocaine, and that, I think my bond for that originally was, I believe it was like $12,000. I can't remember off the top of my head, but anyway, they came, they got me out. I had to sign a bunch of paperwork. They take pictures of you. They get your entire schedule. They want to know, the day of the day that you go to court. You have to call them, let them know, so that they can make sure that they know that you're going. That sort of thing. And I didn't mess around with that, thankfully. So I didn't have any issues there. But there are a lot of times where these bail bondsmen will cross the line in a way. Now, I know that there's a lot of money at risk, and I'm not saying that this takes away from any responsibility for people who don't go to court. That's not what I'm saying at all. The issue comes into where the bail bondsman decides to go Clint Eastwood. And there are a lot of bail bondsmen that are really good people, and they follow the law, and there's no issue. It's only these select few that I'm talking about. But there have been instances where people have had their families intimidated. Several instances of the dog getting shot because they roll up unannounced, and the barking dog goes running at them, and the dog is he's just in the way, and they kill the dog because they don't know if it's violent or not. A lot of things go bad, and one of the big issues with bounty hunters, let me pull this up, is that they're very well protected by the law. And I'm going to try to pull up this thing here. In general, bounty hunters have greater authority to arrest than even the local police. When the defendant signs the bail bond contract, they do something very important. They waive their constitutional rights. They agree that they can be arrested by the bail bonds agent, and they waive extradition, allowing bondsmen to take them to any state. All the bounty hunter needs to make an arrest is a copy of the bail piece, which is the paperwork indicating that the person is a fugitive, and in some states, a certified copy of the bond. He or she does not need a warrant, can enter private property unannounced, and doesn't have to read a fugitive his or her Miranda rights before making the arrest. So those are three very crucial aspects to this. Number one, you sign your constitutional rights away. They don't have to read you rights, so there's no making aware of what rights you do have when you're caught. And they can enter private property without a warrant. So that's recipe for a lot of bad play to go down. Some states require that bounty hunters be licensed. Other states require that bounty hunters register with them. Only a handful of states, Kentucky, Illinois, and Oregon, prohibit bounty hunters entirely from making bail arrests. In these states, bounty hunters need to have a court order. Then the judge will usually order the local police to arrest the fugitive. The one thing a bounty hunter can never do is take the hunt outside of the United States. And obviously, this is why these sort of shows are so entertaining to watch, like Dog the Bounty Hunter, because you literally have more authority than the police do. Like, I mean, you really do. You don't have to. Your hands aren't tied by the court. You can go kicking in doors and all kind of shit. Okay. I had one more thing that I wanted to pull up here about bounty hunters that I found was fascinating. Let's see if I still have it. I think this might be it. Yeah. Okay. So once this loads. Alright. So 6% of all felony defendants were fugitives, or 25% of those who failed to appear in court were fugitives, meaning they were subject to these sort of bounty hunter retracting their bond. When it comes to getting captured or found, or if you're on the run and you think you're going to run from the bounty hunters, 97% get caught. So that is nearly twice as much as police. Let's see if there's anything else interesting about bail bondsmen. Okay, so here are the rules. Okay. Actually, no, there's only 6 states in the United States where entrances to fugitive homes are regulated. So, in other words, if you don't live in California, Georgia, Missouri, New Jersey, Tennessee, Utah, Virginia, Washington, or West Virginia, then a bounty hunter can kick your door in and come on in anytime they please. Well, as long as you're under the bond. Okay. I think that's it about bounty hunters. Yeah. Basically, the reason that they're after you like they are, though, this is me going on to the other side here, because I can totally see their side here. If your bond is $100,000 and you gave them $10,000 to get you out, the court's still going to hit them for $100,000 if you don't show up, because they've co-signed with you, or they've signed your bond. So that's going to hurt them big time, and so they're going to make sure that you are found and they get that money back. All right, let me go back to my. Okay. So this obviously is just talking about how pretrial detention drives jail growth. Each county jail, a lot of them they get subsidies from the state or from the federal government. So for each head that they have in their detention facilities is more money for them. So obviously they're going to try to fill them. One of the major issues that's going on with jails and prisons now is that they're overcrowded. Okay. So, local jails. When talking about the social impact of jails, the average daily population of 612,000 is far less important than the staggering number, 10.6 million, admitted to jails each year. So, what does 10.6 million jail admissions look like? It's enough people to fill a line of prison buses bumper to bumper from New York City to San Francisco. So all the way across the entire country. That's how many people are admitted to jail every year, which is insane. Why are so many people detained in jails before trial? They're not wealthy enough to avoid bail. So median annual pre-incarceration income in 2015 for people ages 23 to 39 in local jails who were unable to post a bail bond compared to incomes of same age non-incarcerated people by gender. So orange is men, yellow is women. If you're detained pre-trial, for people who are detained pre-trial, their median income is $15,598. For non-incarcerated people, it's over twice that. So they're making over twice that, and that's going to reflect that obviously people with more money can bail out of prison. Now, so the question is, why are so many people locked up in the first place? How many are incarcerated for drug offenses? Are the profit motives of private companies driving incarceration? Or is this really about public safety and keeping dangerous people off the streets? Hint, it's not that one. There are myths that this presentation lays out that I think are good. About mass incarceration. The first myth is releasing nonviolent drug offenders would end mass incarceration. That's obviously not true. It's true that police, prosecutors, and judges continue to punish people harshly for nothing more than drug possession. Drug offenses still account for the incarceration of almost 500,000 people nationally. There's also and I think that I did include this one. Let me see if I did. Maybe I didn't. Okay. I can just read it to you. That's fine. So there's a study done, and this is the cost of incarceration versus the cost of prevention in terms of dealing with people either from broken homes or people struggling with drug addiction. So for $62,300, you could incarcerate for a year. Keep that in mind. You could incarcerate one adult, or you could use that $62,300 to send 9 adults to drug treatment and 15 kids to preschool, all for that same price, for putting in prison for a year one adult. For $233,000 a year, that's the average cost per youth, per juvenile. You could send 789 kids to space camp, or sponsor 155 youth jobs. 100 million can fund 50 youth centers, 500 intervention workers, and 25,000 youth jobs. which is the equivalent of I can't do math that quick. Somebody that can do math that quick. If it's $63,000 a year to incarcerate one adult, how many would it take to reach 100 million? And basically, what you're going to have then is, a handful of people versus 50 youth centers, 500 intervention centers, and that's just arbitrary examples of things that you can do with it. But I thought that was pretty scary to think about, that you can do all that with the same money that we're spending to incarcerate one adult. And actually, I have the totals right here for that very thing. So if you look at this chart here, this is going to show you the latest averages of, let's see, that's going to be this one. So this is from my state of North Carolina, and this is the latest sort of like, they give a fact sheet out every year talking about the prison population, and it breaks down like demographics and what they're in there for, that sort of thing. So on this demographic here, I need to find, one second, folks. Here we go. Okay, so the average cost in North Carolina for per day for someone that's on probation or parole is $5 for officer supervision. Now that's per day for people who are on probation or parole. The cost per day per prisoner who is incarcerated, if you're in what's called close custody, which is you're a violent offender, you have a long sentence, you have disciplinary issues, that sort of thing, it's $115 a day. Medium custody, which is your seasoned criminals, they've been caught many times, that was called medium custody, $98 a day. Minimum custody, which is what I was in, $85.18 a day. So let me pull up my calculator real quick. 85, I was in prison 369 days. So when I left, if I were to leave prison today, it wasn't quite this high when I left, but if I were to leave prison today, having stayed 369 days, I would leave with a bill of $31,365 that I would have a set period of time that I have to pay back. Now, there are a lot of cases where you can file for relief, get that sort of thing, get extensions, get waivers, that sort of thing. But that's outrageous for the cost of housing a person per day. When, we're going to get into this. There's so much, like I said, there's so much to the prison system that it's just really hard to sort of keep things in separate boxes because it's all interlinked. But the amount that the prison system makes in terms of the phone scam that goes on, the price jacks with commissary. You have to, for when you get there, I'll just tell you this now. When you get there, you get a standard issue set of clothes, right, and shoes, and they look like Chuck Taylors. That's what the shoes look like, but they are literally almost like somebody cut out the a shoe outline in plywood and just sort of stapled some canvas over top of it. There is the soles of those things are literally almost wood, and in fact I'm almost positive they're wood. They are the most uncomfortable. They will give you blisters. They're awful. However, the state knows this, because if they didn't, and if they thought that there was everything was okay, they wouldn't offer this other option. You can also pay $150 and get you a pair of Nike New Balances, and I'm talking like from year 1991 New Balances. Like, these are not these are not fashionable New Balances. These are those like old school New Balances. But you can pay $150 for them, and the state will allow you to have a pair of those. Now, if there wasn't something, a kickback or a deal, or if they didn't get a percentage of that $150 that these throwback New Balances cost, I don't think they would be offering them that. I don't think that they would be making those standard issue shoes literally the most horrible things to ever walk around in, literally. But they do all that on purpose because it drives sales. Another thing is people take for granted music, or like talk radio, which is so important when you're in prison. Like, the ability to be able to just sit back or lay back or walk around and escape from that environment that you're in. I did that with music, and so you can buy a radio. I wish I had something. I thought I still might have it, but I don't know if it's close. Anyway, they sell these. It's about this big. It's see-through. It's clear. It's cheap. I mean, it's like you would probably go to the drugstore, CVS or Walgreens, and pay $4 or $5 for one of these kind of radios. Just an AM, FM, no bells and whistles radio, right? $50. $50 for this radio. Everything in prison is jacked to the limit, and they are rolling in the money. There's also a thing that they do for holidays called packages, and basically what packages are is they send you a little pamphlet, and these packages have all these different food items that you could want, because you haven't had them since you've been locked up. There's like, oh man, there's every single kind of chip flavor that you could imagine. Hot chocolate, candy like Skittles, Warheads, Sour Patch Kids, Raisinets. I like Raisinets were my thing, so when I saw this on the list, I literally the feeling was indescribable. It sounds stupid now, but you wouldn't believe how seeing Raisinets on a order form can transform your entire week when you're in there. But all kind of stuff, like just different food items that you could get that you were never going to get any other opportunity to get. The catch was these packages were set prices. So, for instance, you could start at a 200 tier, 400 tier, etc. And you had to spend that much. You had to hit that certain amount, and basically you would fill it out, and then you would send it home to, your family or whoever was going to pay for it, and you would put down what you wanted, and then they would go through, and then they would order it based on what they could do, and then you would get your package. But nothing in that package that came would come anywhere close to being worth the price that you paid for it. You're paying for missing out on it. You're paying for it not being for taking it for granted, when you had the freedom to go get it, basically. That's what I called it a freedom tax. Freedom tax was everywhere in prison. They also would set up different, once a month they would have like a pizza sale, or one month they did like a KFC sale where you pay $20 and you get 2 pieces of pizza, or you pay $20 and you get the $5 meal deal that you can get at KFC. Literally, that's what they would. You were paying for administrative fees and the cost that it was to go get it, and that sort of thing. Like you paid over top for everything, and these are, in a lot of instances, people who already can't afford it because they're already in debt to the government up to their eyeballs. They're working 12 hours a day. They're making, at most, I know in North Carolina anyway, at most you can make is $1 a day. So $1 a day you get for, and a lot of these guys have back-breaking jobs, like the road crews that you see that stand outside all day in the middle of the heat, in that that asphalt and the 100-degree weather. $1 a day. $1 a day for that. Or the guys that go along and clean up the sides of the road. My particular unit had an outside laundry service that did laundry for all the area hospitals. There were 3 area hospitals, so all the linens, all the the sheets from hospital beds, all of that stuff came to the laundry facility at the prison, and they would spend 9 hours, 10 hours, 11 hours a day doing laundry, like you would see, on an industrial scale from, an old movie where there's the big vats and they're, it was intense, but they do that every day. There's not a day off at prison. It's an everyday thing. All the jobs, well, most of the jobs are every day, not all of them, but people who work food service every day. People who work the janitorial services every day. People who work the grounds crew every day. And the majority you can make a week working every day is $7. Oddly enough, $7 will give you 1 minute to call home to your family. That's the sad state of things with the legal system. And in these personal stories that I'm telling you, this is just from North Carolina. It's different every state, every county, every city, because there's so many different types of prisons. There are for-profit prisons, there are federal prisons, there are state prisons, there are hospitals where you're still locked down, but you're mandated to go. But all of these different avenues are sticking it to people that don't really have much of a chance anyway. They're obviously already in debt. They couldn't pay their fines. That's why they wound up in prison. Now that they're in prison, they're accruing nearly $100 a day just being there. They're making $1 a day max. That's top. There are some guys that I knew that were getting 15 cents a day. 15 cents. Mainly people who worked in the clothes house. People who were folding the uniforms and stuff for the prison. 15 cents a day. How do you expect these people to make it? How does anyone expect these people to climb out of that hole? Number one, when they get out, they've already got a felony or a misdemeanor attached to their name. And 65% of people who own businesses say that they would be very weary of hiring someone with a criminal record. Well, what if your crime originally was that your pants were sagging, or you spit on a sidewalk, or you threw a dwarf? Does that justify in any means, by any stretch of the imagination, that your life should be ruined? Because that follows you. That will affect your ability to vote, your ability to carry a firearm, your ability to be in the area with other people who have felonies or misdemeanors, depending on your release conditions. These stupid fines literally fuck people's lives up. And people don't seem to, for whatever reason, pay that any mind. And that's sort of what my goal here is to try to fix. Because if we take it piece by piece, I think we can draw some attention to it. So, technical violations are the main reasons, like I said earlier, for people being incarcerated. People going from probation to incarceration. And you can see in that first side over there, a new sentence, 64,000. Same sentence, meaning no new offense, 98,000. On the other side, people going from parole to incarceration, the majority, 70,000, was due to a revocation, meaning no new sentence. So basically what this is showing you is that if you're charged with something, let's take me for example, I'm charged with possession of cocaine. Okay? I have all these terms that I have to commit to while I'm on probation or parole. So there are many different factors that can violate me. One of those is if I catch a new sentence while on probation or parole. Usually that's an automatic violation. So if I'm on probation for possession of cocaine, 64,000 cases of people, or excuse me, so I'm on probation for cocaine. If I commit a new offense, let's say I'm caught with a joint, right? People like me in that case would total about 64,000 cases. Now, me being charged with, or me being on probation for possession of cocaine, and absconding, meaning I don't contact my probation officer. I am not where I said I was going to be. I fail a drug test. I'm out after curfew. All of those technical aspects to that original charge, the possession of cocaine, that is nearly 100,000 cases. So the vast majority of people get sent to prison not for catching a new crime, but for a technical violation on that original crime. So, like, if my probation officer came by, I never went to the door, or he called, I never answered, eventually he would violate me. He could also do that for not paying the supervising fees, or if I owe any outstanding court costs, restitution, child support, any of that, and failure to pay could violate me and send me back. Now, this next chart. Contrary to myth, people incarcerated for violent offenses and released are least likely to be arrested again. This is an interesting stat here. So, this takes into account 4 categories: drug offenders, public order offenders, property offenders, which is like theft and burglary, and then violent offenders. Okay? And this is showing the stats for people who are rearrested for similar offenses within 3 years of release from prison. Nearly half, or a little bit over half, of people who go to prison for drug-related offenses will be rearrested. Half with public order, 45% with property, and only 25% with violent offenses. Put that in there because I thought that was very interesting. Okay, let's see. Although it does say right here. What? Okay, maybe you'll share my surprise that they even put this in here, but I'll read it and you can tell me what you think. People convicted of sexual assault and homicide are actually among the least likely to reoffend after release. People convicted of homicide are the least likely to be rearrested. Isn't that obvious? Like, if you kill someone, obviously you, I think more times than not, you felt like you had a reason to, and if they're dead, why would you reoffend? That's just odd. Okay. One second. Okay. Now that's going through the youth. We'll get to the youth. It's immigration. Psychiatric. Okay. All right. So this graph right here is going to show you the overall picture of the criminal justice system and correction control. Of everyone that is in the Department of Corrections across the United States, probation makes up the overwhelming majority. And that's by design, and that's on purpose. And no, that's not better than going to prison in many cases. Sometimes it is, and most people want to avoid going to prison, but probation is literally it's a vampire. Like it bites into your neck and it just sucks you dry for as long as it can, or until you fuck up, and then it's waiting for you to kick you on down the road. The data in these charts makes it clear that ending the war on drugs will go in a large step to clearing up some of this mess that we have. But you have to look at the entire picture into where people are going to really see the full scale of this. Some questions that the people who put this graph together ask are state officials and prosecutors willing to rethink not just long sentences for drug offenses, but the reflexive, simplistic policymaking that has served to increase incarceration for violent offenses as well? Now, the reason that I asked that is because there is just a stupid and tragic and criminal, actually, set of laws that we follow when it comes to sentencing and how we tie our judges' hands. I'm going to do an entire one of these segments on this, but just to sort of give you an overview, mandatory minimum sentencing is in large part to do with the mess that we're in. So I'll give you an example. I believe it was in Missouri. I could be wrong, and correct me if I am, but there was a teacher. She was a younger lady. She was teaching, I forget what grade, but the boy in question was 14. And this teacher was arrested on charges of sexually assaulting a child. And what happened was that the teacher let the 14-year-old touch her breast. Was it appropriate? Absolutely not. Distasteful? Absolutely. Disgusting? Absolutely. What person in a trusted role of an educator would think that was a good idea by any means? This is not a defense of her for what she did and how she handled the situation. However, I will defend against what ultimately happened to her, because with the charge that she was convicted of, found guilty of, there was only one path the jury could, one option the jury had. They could find her guilty, not guilty, which was the sexual assault. She was found guilty, and the judge was mandated, didn't have a choice, because of the way that the laws are set up. If you get convicted of X, you receive automatically Y sentence. Period. And that goes along with many different laws, and depending on which state you're in, it's different. But if you get convicted of certain crime, there is a mandatory maximum and minimum sentence that goes along with that. Period. No workarounds. Judge can't work outside those bounds. She got life in prison. Life in prison for a 14-year-old touching her breast. Now, there is no scenario where that makes any sense whatsoever. And the problem is that the laws are such that it doesn't allow for these sort of instances. The sexual assault, I'm sure when the lawmakers were making these mandatory minimums and setting the sentences with them, you're thinking sexual assault. A adult is going to force themselves on a child and emotionally and physically scar them for life. But because we have tied the hands of the judges and they can't, they can't work around this, they can't overrule this is the way that it is, people like her get caught up into it on an instance that is outside the norm, still not appropriate, still should be a pretty stiff punishment for her, but she should not go to prison for life for that instance. There's just no world in which that's correct. So these have to be, I don't know how they still haven't been gotten rid of, but they need to be getting reevaluated, looked at. And this is just such a mess. The legal system, and this is why nothing ever happens to it, because we've created this monster. Everyone's used to the way it works. No one wants to rock the boat. There's too many different moving pieces. If you disrupt one, it's going to send shockwaves down others. The legal system moves slow anyway, so it's going to be a constant back and forth. So literally you have all of these people on both sides, Republican, Democrat, Independent, it doesn't matter what you are. Everyone understands the need for prison reform, but no one is doing anything about it. No one. It gets talked about every year. It gets brought up. It gets asked. But election time is the only time that you hear about it. When outside of that do you hear discussions going on about it? Or, a bill's going through. We're more concerned about locking up women for having the right to choose what to do with their own bodies in other states. It's outrageous. It's outrageous. Okay, I'm going to start wrapping up here because I just looked at the time. I didn't realize how time got away from me. We'll have to do civil forfeitures next time, which I'll give you a little rundown of those. Civil forfeitures are yet another way that the state makes money. And basically what that means is, if my grandpa didn't trust a bank, let's say he kept $10,000 under his mattress and he passed away, we're clearing out his house. There's the money where he said he left it for me. I box it up in a box or wherever you would put $10,000 worth of cash, throw it in the car with a few other belongings, and then I'm heading down the road. And I get pulled over. And the cop comes around and asks me if he can search my vehicle for whatever reason. And let's say I'm not being a dick that day. I know there's nothing in the car, so I oblige and say, sure, go ahead. Well, he looks through the car, finds the bag with 10 grand in it, and then comes and asks me about it. So, what you got 10 grand worth of cash for? Grandpa passed away, left it to me, didn't trust banks, taking it home. What you really doing with 10 grand? That's what happened. See, I think you got 10 grand because you're about to go buy a hell of a lot of drugs. You sure that ain't what you're gonna do? Anyway, you get the point. Basically, the cop can walk away with my 10 grand because he has a suspicion that it's going to be used during the course of a crime. And it will be taken down to the city and held, and I will then have to hire an attorney or represent myself and prove my intentions for that money, where I got that money, all that stuff, before it's given back to me. When it is given back to you, obviously you're going to get a fine or a holding fee or something from the city. But just the suspicion of one stupid idiot that pulls you over and has a bad night and sees a bunch of cash and is jaded and thinks that, oh, well, if you have that much cash, then obviously you're a drug kingpin, can take that money. And if you don't do what it takes to get a judge to agree with you that that's what you were going to do with the money, or that's where the money came from, it's the city's. And that goes along with your house, your car. If the judge didn't believe that 10 grand was mine and that I was going to use my car in the course to take that 10 grand to go get, a couple kilos of coke, they would come take my car. Become property of the state. And it gets way, way, way more sinister than that. That's just a rough overview. But my entire point of this is to point out that in any of these instances, these practices are predatory, they're dishonest, they ruin lives, they create untold amount of difficulties, harm for people who are already struggling in bad situations. And these sort of things need to be brought to light and rectified. I firmly believe that we set up a prison system. I'll say this in closing. That we set up a prison system not designed to rehabilitate, but designed to warehouse and squeeze dry every dime, nickel, and penny that we can get out of people that either make a mistake, take a wrong turn, fuck up, decide to party a little bit, do some drugs, wear their pants low, have their grass higher than it should be, not give a fuck about chipped paint. We allow these sort of minor instances to be tacked onto someone that doesn't have the means to pay for it, already struggling, and they just get pushed into that machine. And once that machine's got them, it starts charging them for every little thing. Every day they're in jail. Every day that they're on probation. Every move they make. Court costs. Clerk of court costs. State costs. Administrative fees. You can't pay that? Oh. Back to the machine. Keeps accruing. Spit you back out again. Can you pay it this time? Well, I can try. Well, they can't get a job. They've lost their rights, bear arms, voting. They've got a criminal history now, so that's going to be even more difficult to get a job. They don't have a car, most likely, because the DMV suspended their license, or they can't drive a car because the DMV suspended their license due to failure to pay these fines and fees. How do they get ahead? How do they get one foot in front of the other? How do they begin to climb out of that hole? Because there's certainly no one throwing a rope down to them. They don't. They get stuck. And what happens usually in these cases are that people who were rounded up on drug offenses, selling, distributing, they go right back to that. Not because they want to, because it's the only thing they know, and in a lot of cases it's now become their only option. They know they have to have a certain set of funds at a certain location by a certain time, or their freedom's going to get taken away again. They can't get a job. They can't drive to their job if they got one. So they fall back on the only thing that they know in a lot of cases. Doesn't make it right on their part, because it's not. Because the same can be said about people who steal, or that sort of thing. People go around, get desperate, they steal things just so they can have that money to not go back. People get desperate. And so next Friday we'll talk about civil forfeiture, and then what rights that you do have. Just see. Yeah. So I'll finish up tonight by someone asked me, and I believe that this person, when they sent their email, I could tell that they had been locked up before too, because they used some very specific terminology, but they wanted to know what my hustle was when I was in prison. So I figured I would tell you. I'll wrap up with a little personal story. That's a true thing. Most of the time, everybody in prison has a hustle or something that they do, something that they're good at, something that they can offer someone. So if somebody needs something, something drawn, something legal, drafted up, letters written. A lot of people in there can't read or write, so many people ask you to write letters to their loved ones, read, that sort of thing. Basically, everybody's got something that they can contribute to someone that someone will need along the way. So my job there, once you get classified, is they'll assign you to different camps around the state. Everybody goes into a processing camp. I went into Noose Correctional, which is the processing camp here in North Carolina. Everybody goes to Noose. Doesn't matter if you're a murderer or you spit on a sidewalk. Everybody in the prison system goes to Noose first for 2 weeks. They analyze you. You take tests. They decide where you're going to be assigned to, what risk threat you are, and then you're sent on your way to whichever permanent prison that you're going to go to. Noose was awful. It's the It's the obviously because there's so many different people coming in with so many different like risk levels, but I never got the pleasure to leave. I had to stay my entire sentence there because uh, when I came through, their warehouse guy had just left, and so they needed me to fill that position. So I had to stay at this hellhole for my entire sentence because that's where I was going to get my job assigned. Funny thing, when you are in jail and you're waiting to go to prison after you've been sentenced, usually it's about 2 weeks ish. But they don't tell you when they're coming to get you. They don't tell you what time. They don't tell you what day you're leaving. Uh, they come in the middle of the night and they tap you on your bunk, tell you to pack up, and you have to do it quietly, and you can't talk to anyone. You can't say goodbye, none of that stuff. Can't pass stuff off. You pack your stuff and you're marched out, and then you're put on a bus, and that bus goes to several different points, and you switch buses, and you switch buses again, and usually about 12 hours later you arrive at your destination. And they do that for security reasons, just in case, you know, your family or friends or whatever are planning on breaking you out. They don't make it easy if you had anybody that was planning to do that. So they're shuffling you all over the place in the meantime. So anyway, my job was the warehouse, which was where all of the food that was extra, all the, you know, all the good stuff, all the good drinks, chips, candy, sandwiches, ice cream, that sort of thing, came into me. Now, what's interesting here is that all of that stock gets put in my sort of my warehouse office area. I'm the only one with a key to the lock to this room. Another guard can't have a key. Another inmate can't have a key. No one on the compound will have a key to that place but me. And they do that because every month you have to be accountable for everything in that room. So they know how much is there, or supposed to be there. And then they'll go in and count everything with you. And if you're short, you get a grace. You get like a grace area that you can be short. But if you're any shorter than that, then you get charged with theft. You get an actual a street charge. You know, they'll take you down to the courthouse and arrest you for theft of and whatever amount's missing from there. So just to make sure that no guards can harbor any grudges against you and go in there and eat stuff and then you get blamed for it, you're the only one that can have a key to that little room. You're the only one that can go in there, except for inventory days. No other guards, no other inmates can go in there. Nothing. You have that entire place to yourself. And obviously, no one would use that area, you know, in case it needed to be like a cover or to hide things that might be frowned upon in the meantime. No one would do that. So if you're thinking about that, don't even. But my sort of thing, what I learned to do there was people would come in, usually on Thursdays, and give me a list. And I always went from like the gang, heads of the gangs first, the high-ranking people. They would give me a list of the things that they wanted and to make sure that they got. And I would go in, separate all that stuff out like a little goodie bag, click their cards, and then they would give me a certain, you know, a dollar amount for doing that, to click off their cards. Now, I would also use items, for whatever to cover, you know, borrowing something else. Or anyway, it's always like a give and take, a debt and pay the debt back sort of thing. But what I wound up doing was putting out, like if somebody was short that week or they didn't have enough money that week, I would cover them whatever they wanted. To return, they had to pay whatever the item was double back. So if they got a honey bun, they gave 2 honey buns back. And if they didn't give back, then they didn't get anything until they did, because I was in control of that stuff. So I never had an issue with getting the double back. So I wound up having an additional almost store in terms of like items. I had accrued so much, like that literally, and that's currency there. Like you pay for that and everything. People, like cigarettes were the big thing. Like you would pay $10 sometimes for one cigarette, and so you would pay that $10 in the equivalent of food items. So after a while, I was like Scarface. I had I had locker fulls full of food. They could just dole it out for whatever. It's weird to hear myself talk about this stuff like out loud, because now it just sounds so weird and like it wasn't a real thing. But if you've never been, you can't understand the sort of microcosm of society that prison is, because it's just so strange looking back. There was I'll get into some more stories as we go along in this thing, but yeah, it was a very strange time. Let me make sure that I've covered everything. Okay. Sorry too that I haven't been following along with you guys in the chat. I've been having to pay attention to these slides. Let me pull up some chats real quick. Okay. Yuhan Roderick says, can't listen in the studio, recording one of the podcasts, but I'm in the chat. Take my money and visit verygoodpodcast.com/RNRawPod. Love you all. Yes, and remember, Arn will be with us next week, so tune in for that. He would be thrilled to hear how you market that podcast. I think he would be thrilled to hear that. RJ, the best bounty hunters lived aboard the Bebop. I'm afraid I don't get that reference, RJ. You might have to help me out with that one. Min says, I have been a citizen for 11 years and have had no idea that prison in the most powerful country on the planet can be this bad. I want to hug you badly. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It is bad, and it's this is just the tip of the iceberg. We haven't even gotten into the plea deals, the sentencing, the dynamics when it comes to prison life, what your rights are and what rights you lose, the control in terms of when you actually get to prison, because when you're there, you're at the mercy of the guard's mood that day, and they can do all sorts of things to just make your life hell, from work assignment duties, write-ups, which can add more days onto your sentence. For working, one thing in addition to your awesome salary, one thing you do get is usually it's a half day or a quarter day, depending on where your job is. But you accrue days for, each day that you work, and that comes off of the end of your sentence. So if you get sentenced for 2 years, every day you work, or every 3 days you work, you get a day off that sentence, and you just keep working it back until present day meets wherever you are in that sequence. But they can take those away from you, and you can get written up for talking back to someone, whether and that's subjective, but you can get written up for that, and they can take every day that you've worked for away. Poof, gone. If you've worked up 100 days off your sentence and you piss a guard off, and the disciplinary board is in a bad mood too, or they don't like you either, poof, gone. 100 more days added on to your sentence. And if you make a big deal about it, they'll tack on more. So, and then there's the solitary confinement part. That's the one that I'm the most passionate about. I think solitary confinement is disgraceful. It's cruel and unusual. It messes people up. I have seen it. I have seen people go in for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and come out and they are a shell of who they used to be, or they're not them at all. It just drives them to the point of breaking. There's just so many different things. We also got in my year that I was there. I spent time in solitary confinement. I also was wrapped up in the middle of a medical quarantine. My entire dorm of 60 people was shut down for 2 weeks. Couldn't leave, couldn't go outside, nothing. All the meals and stuff were brought to the dorm and passed through a window by a guard. Like they zipped the place up like it was The Walking Dead, because I don't know what it was that was going around. They think it was mold or something, but some people, they would get up to go eat breakfast, and as soon as their feet hit the floor, they fell right back over. And I think it was 3 people fell out one day in my dorm, and so they locked that bitch down. And for 2 weeks, we weren't going anywhere, nowhere, and it was misery. I never want to do that again. I was also there, well, I wasn't technically there, but the day after I left, there was a riot at the prison that I was at. I like to think it was because they missed me. I can't confirm that, but nonetheless, it made the news. You can YouTube Noose Correctional Institution riot. They set a couple buildings on fire, held a guard hostage. It was a big ordeal, but thankfully I wasn't there for that. And they actually shut the prison down for like 6 months after that. They shipped everybody out. Once they got the place under control, they shipped everybody out. I don't know why, what purpose that served, but anyway, I'll get into all that. And then Matthias 11841 left a super chat with no message, so thank you. Tomorrow we will be joined by a gentleman that is in Iran to talk about what's going on over there, along with a couple of other Middle Eastern countries. I've been looking forward to him coming on for quite a while, actually, but it's very, very, very fortunate that he's coming now in the midst of all of this shit that's going on with Iran. So that will be tomorrow at 9 p.m. Saturday at 4, we will have a Patreon hangout. We will be discussing the Operation St. Click thing that we're going to be doing and how you guys are going to be picking the winners for that. And we're also going to be doing something I'm excited about. Pretty exciting. Just to get a breath of fresh air and the mojo going again. So that will be Saturday at 4. Make sure you join that. You can get the link off of Discord or Patreon. And then John and I will be back Saturday night, and then Jimmy and I on Sunday, and then back here with Katie on Monday. So I'll be here tomorrow at 9. Hope you will be. Love you guys, and we'll see you then. Now, I remember to put the end screen card up. We're getting it.